You guys good?
Yes.
Just so you know, I know there's a lot of subcommittees coming up that you guys want to get to, so I'll try to keep it condensed. So I'll just right away just turn it over so we can go right into it.
There's a bill that would merge the Iowa Department of Natural Resources and the Iowa Ag Department. Why?
To be honest with you, Kay, I had a conversation this morning that there was going to be a subcommittee on that. Didn't follow up from what the results were that came from that subcommittee, whether it moved forward. I'd have to, on a lot of these I'll probably give you today. Let me have some more conversations and kind of see where we're going with that. As you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of bills. I try to keep track of all of them, but I'm aware of it, but I've not had a follow-up with the chair.
What sort of conversation are you having about school funding?
Well, school funding? Yeah, so I think you'll see, I think it's came up, but early next week on Monday, our intent is to have a subcommittee on Monday morning or Monday during the day, and then during the same day, we'll also have a bill that'll come out of the Appropriations Committee. I think we'll have a sub on the Senate bill, keep that vehicle alive, but you'll see us bring an amendment that's going to be at least at the 2% level. It's going to be a little bit higher level of funding than what's currently in the Senate bill, but that's what we're looking on the Monday agenda. So.
Last year you incorporated some other elements for other areas in school spending. Will that be part of the package?
We're still working through what the final package will be. We went over this yesterday in caucus, kind of where the caucus want to finally land now that we have a vehicle from the Senate. You know, things like the $14 million that we've talked about for paraeducators, that's something that continues to be important. The governor also included some pieces for the budget guarantee in her bill that I think there's some interest within the caucus. So I think you will see a few other pieces in that beyond just an SSA number. Yeah.
There's a subcommittee scheduled next week on a bill that would define life at conception and make it a Class A felony to abortion in Iowa. Is that something that you think has the support of the full caucus this year?
I think it's probably too early to say. As you know, there's going to be a lot of bills that have subcommittees that move forward. There's a lot of bills that have subcommittees that don't move forward. You know, our caucus has always been pro-life, but a bill like that is probably kind of the next step in that conversation. I don't think we've had it yet, so to guess where the caucus is going to land on that, I don't want to take what that guess is, but like a lot of other bills, having the subcommittee as part of the process doesn't mean that we've already made up our mind on what the final destination is for a piece of legislation.
Would you personally support that one?
I haven't had a chance to fully read and vet what that bill has looked like. I know, again, based on my record and a lot of the members of our caucus, we've been pro-life. Some of these bills that have been filed this year take a little bit different approach, so it's something that I'd want to get some more feedback on and engage in that conversation before I make a commitment.
On school funding, Democrats are criticizing Republicans for missing that 30-day deadline again. Why does that keep happening, and just how important do you think that deadline is?
Yeah, like I said, I think, and part of it's going to be, and we've told I shouldn't say everyone's told their schools back home, but we've also said, and traditionally in the House, we've come in at a little bit higher number than the governor and the Senate has. And so what we tell our schools is if it takes us a little longer to get to the final destination, know that there's things within the budget conversation that we're trying to fight for. If they want us, if the 30-day deadline is the only goal that we set for ourselves, I think it's going to be harder for us to be able to achieve some of those additional funding levels that we may want to see, whether it's through SSA or looking at things like paraeducators and other things. So that's what I'd say to Iowans. It's most of the time it's been because we want to try to maximize what we're getting in some of these negotiations and conversations.
Would you like to see state incentives go towards trying to draw an NFL team to Iowa?
Isn't that a Senate bill?
It is a Senate bill. But I didn't ask you about a bill. I just asked
No,
you
I know. I read just enough, Aaron, to know that I'm not wading into those waters. And who wants to bring the Bears in anyways? No. Oh, no, the Bear fans. No, I don't know enough about that bill to even give you a comment on that. I'll let the Senate handle that for now.
Members of your caucus have brought forward a couple of bills that would limit the governor's authority during a disaster, a public health disaster. So is that going to be the first? Are we going to see more bills that restrict the governor's authority in anticipation of possibly a Democrat being elected governor? That happened. Republican legislatures did things like that in Wisconsin and North Carolina and other states.
And I think overall to that question, Laura, just from the standpoint of any decision that we're making right now, I think everyone says, oh, it's because there's fear that there's going to be a Democrat, or it's fear we're going to have a new administration. We've had a pretty consistent from Governor Branstad through Governor Reynolds, whether it was department heads and a way of handling how they do state government. So anything we look at that boils down to what does it look like for the future of the governor's race, I don't want Iowans to read into any more than the fact that we will have a different governor that does not kind of come from the standpoint of the Branstad Reynolds legacy. And so those decisions that we're making isn't just partisan focused. As we've been looking at, looking back over the last few years, now that we're away from the COVID and away from some of the emergency declarations, I think our caucus has said, okay, it's time for us to really look at what are those important things. I know there's several different bills. I think we're going to try to stay focused in that approach, looking at some of the opening of churches, looking at some other things around voting and elections. So we're going to try to keep it in limited scope. I don't expect to see a 500-page bill on emergency powers, but there are some things that our caucus thinks that in hindsight, we, after looking back at some time to digest, that we need to have on the table.
What about limiting the governor's appointment power? That's been done in some other states after a Democrat was elected governor.
Well, I didn't hear what you questioned.
What about limiting a governor's appointment power? For instance?
Again, not knowing all the bills that are out there and that members may be filing yet even before funnel, I don't think that's where we're really focused on in this conversation at this point in time. I think it's going to be a much more limited list of things. Again, this is something that the caucus has continued to talk about for the last several years.
Some of the conversations I've had with school funding, it sounds like the districts are feeling strapped after the teacher pay minimums increase and not getting sort of new money to pay for that this year. Is that something that's part of the conversation for you, and how big of a deal do you think that is for school districts?
As far as, from what standpoint, as far as the
So they have to pay a higher teacher salary now, and the first 2 years there was some money for that, and there's not this year.
Yeah, and I think, we continue to have these conversations about education funding, and as we roll our bill out next week, as you're seeing some more and more, seeing reports come out, I was just told, and I want to get some more information on this, LSA has produced some documents that show we're between local, state, and federal money, we're putting almost $24,000 per student into education. If you look at a class at Dyke Hartford of 20 to 25 kids, that's $400,000 that we're putting into each individual classroom. And so some of this is, remember, we're spending almost half of our budget on education. We're spending more than we ever have when it comes to K-12 education. All we ever talk about is just, well, there needs to be more money. And yes, we continue to make record investments in education. But also at the same time, you're seeing things coming out of Iowa City right now where there's a potentially of millions and millions of dollars being mismanaged. Now, I'm not saying that's happening in every school district, but at the same time, we also have to look at how the money's being spent at the same time. And we have a perfect example of it from one of the largest school districts who sound like they can't even keep track of what's going on in their own budget.
There have been bills about increasing safety for members of the General Assembly, including there's a bill in subcommittee today on giving members of the General Assembly the ability to carry anywhere in the state. Is that something that your caucus is supportive of?
I know there's been several different bills on safety, looking at whether it's from legislators and making sure that they have some level of home security, and looking at that. It's something that we're taking very serious. Even this, what we've seen even just happened recently here in the Capitol with members, being approached by members of the public in an aggressive manner. Doing these jobs is not the same as I've been doing this for 20 years now. It's not the same. And the kind of involvement we have from folks, we just have to have our radars up. So any of those conversations aren't going to be driven from me. It's going to be based on what the caucus feels is best, and not just Republicans, but Democrats as well, when it comes to the safety of serving in these roles, in which it's crazy that we even have to have this conversation, but a lot of members feel that we should. I'll do one more.
The governor's health bill is being heard at subcommittee today, and it includes a lot of different provisions, including over-the-counter ivermectin. There was a different subcommittee on that issue earlier this session. Is that something that you have support for in your caucus? Is that something that you support or so?
If I remember right, that bill, is it the over-the-counter birth control and the ivermectin? Is it both pieces in the same bill? I can't remember right off the top of my head.
The governor's bill has a tobacco tax.
Oh, the entirety of the big package. Okay. As far as on that one specifically, I think that's going to be one that takes time for us to understand whether it moves forward or not. Even if it moves forward through committee, having the tax pieces and some of those over-the-counter pieces in it, that's going to be something that takes time for us to digest and see where we want to be necessarily. Because I don't think right now there's a consensus within our caucus on several of those pieces right now today, but that doesn't mean we can't find it.
Does that mean there's no consensus on ivermectin and birth control over the counter?
Well, we've seen over the last several years on the over-the-counter birth control, there hasn't been. I said that that's something that I would support when it comes to ivermectin. I think there would be a level of support within that, but when it comes to the tax piece, I mean, that's a pretty big shift in what we've seen in the past when it comes to those tax policies. So I think kind of as a whole, it's gonna take time for us to kind of see where we wanna be on all those pieces. So, all right, thanks guys, have fun.